What are the financial and psychological costs of the coronavirus pandemic to the sporting world? The Olympics is the latest major event to be postponed or cancelled. What will be the impact on athletes, fans and businesses? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Bernard Smith. 3 Olympic Games have been cancelled in the past because of the 2 world wars. But this year is the first time the event has ever been postponed. The coronavirus pandemic made it impossible to hold the Olympics and Paralympics in Tokyo this summer. Australia and Canada said they wouldn't send teams to Japan because of the risk to health. Some qualifying events have already been cancelled. And global travel bans made it nearly impossible for athletes and fans to plan flights. The Games organisers promised the world's biggest sporting event will take place before summer next year as a symbol of triumph over the virus. The delay will cost the Japanese government, businesses and sponsors billions of dollars.
I think it's reasonable to postpone for a year. I think it's important and an inevitable decision.
I feel bad for the people who were looking forward to it and the athletes that waited and trained for 4 years. I'm also worried about the Japanese economy.
It is disappointing for sure, but when you think about the health of the athletes as well as that of the spectators, I understand. The novel coronavirus is spreading so quickly around the world, and this is a very serious issue internationally.
The Olympics is just the latest sporting event to be affected by the pandemic. Hundreds of tournaments and competitions worldwide are either on hold or cancelled. Matches in Europe's hugely popular and lucrative football leagues are all postponed. The Formula One season opening race in Australia 2 weeks ago was cancelled. The French Open tennis tournament in Paris is now pushed back to September. And India's Premier League cricket is already postponed until next month. Organisers are now under pressure to cancel it altogether after the Prime Minister ordered all 1.3 billion Indians to stay at home. Let's bring in our panel. Joining us from London is Gail Emms, a badminton silver medalist for Team Great Britain in the 2004 Athens Olympics. From Dublin in the Republic of Ireland, Tadgh MacIntyre, a lecturer in sports and performance psychology. And from Reading in the UK, James Reade, an associate professor at the University of Reading. Welcome to you all and thanks for joining us. A question for all of you, and I'll start though with you, Gail. Was cancelling the Olympics, or postponing the Olympics rather, the right thing to do?
Absolutely. I think, from my point of view, I think it was frustrating that it took so long to announce that decision. There are so many athletes out there just left in limbo and they weren't sure, and they could see everything else being cancelled or postponed. And yet for some reason, the IOC just kept delaying and delaying. I understand there's a lot to be considered, and there's money situation and logistics and everything like that. But when it comes to a huge decision for an athlete who is basically preparing for this every 4 years, decisions have to be made, because for that person, for their physical and mental health and their whole goal and their whole dream, decisions have to be made. It is the right one because now it's done. The decision's been made, and athletes can then prepare for what's, for next year and just sort of start adjusting and coming to terms with it. And also, we just don't know about the coronavirus and when it's going to end, basically. That unknown is the biggest fear for any athlete. So, right decision, and now it's down to the planning.
Tadgh, it seems then there was little choice, was there, for the IOC but to postpone?
Yeah, and I'm really impressed with Gail's conclusions there. I mean, we're really talking about the athlete's voice has pushed this move. The speed of it was enacted upon because of athlete groups and surveys across different federations to find out what their views were. And you can think about it under current conditions. It's untenable for people that do water sports to have to train on an ergo in their gym or in their garage, or people that do sprint hurdles to be training in the cross-country trail by themselves. So the magnitude of this has been recognised by athletes. I've looked at a lot of athletes' posts on this, and they've been talking about, there's something bigger than us here. They really do recognise the threat, and they also recognise that their challenge will move on to a different timeline.
James, I know the economics of sport is one of your specialities, but was there really little option left from what you've been reading, in your view, but to postpone?
Absolutely no alternative, really. I mean, the athletes couldn't get there. And of course, the safety of athletes has to be the most important thing. We all like to watch sport. Yes, it's kind of a trivial thing in the grand scheme of things when we're talking about lives and deaths at stake with the coronavirus. But we love watching our sport. It gives us a great distraction. It gives us great entertainment, great excitement. It's out there, it's fanfare. But it can't be that if the athletes aren't safe, and if the athletes can't even get there, because they couldn't get there at the moment, given the travel bans in place all around the world. The reality is it had to be cancelled, and it was quite strange, as Gail said, that it took so long. It would have seemed better from an optics perspective for the announcement to have been, it's cancelled and we'll deal with the details later. That would have, I think, been a much more of a proactive stance for them to have taken, but it is what it is, and the right decision's now been taken.
Tadgh, I think we know that the consensus among athletes was to postpone the Olympics. But for example, Britain's double Olympic taekwondo star Jay Jones, she spoke of her devastation. You give your heart and soul to something for 4 years, she says, and then for it not to go ahead is just horrible. What is the mental effect going to be on athletes now that this has been postponed?
It's a really interesting time. Absolutely, there's going to be devastation. There's going to be anxiety. There was a great release for many athletes and relief from the pressure that they thought they'd have to train under these conditions. But for some athletes, they've been locked into this 1,600-day cycle, and it's obviously very precious to them, and that's important too. What we have to do is provide supports to those athletes that are struggling to deal with it, and it'll take time. Probably for all athletes, it'll take a bit of time to get through this. But athletes are adaptable. I mean, the key thing about sport competition is people voluntarily put themselves into a pressurized environment. They have psychological skills. They have capacities, not just individually, but collectively to deal with this. And I think that's, what's been really, really clear to me is that athlete support for one another through this challenge is going to be really important, and their voices are being heard by one another. And we need to support those for whom it's a struggle. And we know others. I read today about Jessica Fox, who's a multiple world championship medalist and Olympic medalist in canoe slalom, and she talked about we have to adapt. I mean, this adaptability is what athletes do. They adapt to different conditions. It may take a bit of time. They may need some support around it. But the great thing is athletes do have skills in adapting to different circumstances.
Gail, I see you nodding away there. You, of course, have been there. You've built up to taking part in Olympics. How would you have felt had it been taken, this opportunity taken away from you? How do you teach people to deal with it?
Personally, it would be like someone who'd grabbed my heart and pulled it out and just trampled all over it, then punched me in the stomach over and over again. That is exactly how I'd have felt if I was in this situation. The Olympic Games for many athletes is the pinnacle. It's the dream. You watch it as a little girl or a little boy, and you watch this, the world's greatest sporting event, and you look at the TV, you cheer your nation on, and you go, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And that goal and that dream that carries you through every single horrid training session. And I mean, they're horrible. They're really, really horrible. And when it's raining outside and you've got to go out running, and when you're hurting physically and mentally, but you keep that in your head that one day you'll be an Olympian. I am going to go to the Olympic Games and represent my country. That's what gets you through. So when that's taken away, it is just horrid. It's the worst feeling. The only way I can kind of try to describe it to people is if you're revising for the biggest exam of your entire life, and then suddenly, oh no, you can't do that anymore. It's a chance for athletes to show off their skills, to be appreciated for all that hard work, those training sessions. They want to show off. They want to be those gladiators with the fans. That's their chance to do that, and that's taken away. Now, I know it's a year later, but that one moment, because this date, that time of the race, the competition, whatever it is, has been fixed for so long that you know exactly when and where you are going to compete in that Olympic final or maybe get that medal. So that is now completely gone. But it's just moved back a year. So it's going to be horrible. And, you know, like I say, it's going to take those months to get over it. It will take time to get over it because it's like brain, you know, sort of head explosion. You can't get over this. But with support, and I think that word is going to be used a lot, you know, in this discussion, support. You know, the athletes can readapt. They can, you know, get with their coaches. They can replan. And it will be okay. It's just trying to get around that situation because it hurts. It hurts here in your heart and here in your stomach and here.
Well, very heartfelt there from Gail, Tadgh. But I mean, there are not just Olympic athletes putting their lives on hold. There's footballers, cricketers, tennis players, Formula One racing drivers. What advice do you give to these elite athletes to deal with being in limbo?
Yeah, I think limbo is a good description. I think we should hone in on those that are most vulnerable. So the most vulnerable athletes are those which are in individual sports which don't have the same support structures around them, be it a professional team or a part of an Olympic squad. And athletes for whom this has led to accelerated career termination or transition out of the sport, those that this was going to be their last year and they may not have the opportunity to go into 2021 season. So it's important that, you know, they're the ones that will need access to good service and lots of support. I think in terms of the breadth and scope of this, I mean, this is a universal issue now. I think we can rely upon athletes to use their own skills, you know, which includes resilience, their capacity to use their resources to help themselves through this challenge, and collectively as a community to support one another. Beyond that, there's tidbits of psychological advice which apply to the general population around developing a routine, and then there's sport-specific elements, which means, you know, they should check in with one another at times they're meant to go training. So when they're restricted from training, they still have this what we call social support or connectivity to others. We also need them to restructure and adapt their goals, you know, for those that can continue on. So their season isn't, let me put it this way, that their career goals aren't determined by this current challenge, just their season goals. I mean, we need athletes to think really in the long term and think of a longer scale trajectory, and that will help them cope.
James, can I ask, from the economic side of it, how important are sports to national economies in terms of the knock-on effect of stadiums not being filled with people going to watch games, people not paying sponsorship rights? What's the knock-on effect going to be of all these sports being put on hold?
Well, of course, it's hard to put an exact number on exactly the financial amount, and therefore any kind of percentage of GDP. Not least equally because the way in which it affects us morally. It makes us feel good, feel happy. You know, Gail has been talking about all of those preparations that go on behind the scenes, and we see the end result, and it's amazing to watch it on these wonderful summer nights at Olympic Games and World Championships over years gone by, and in the Premier League, for example. But we can certainly, you know, we can get some numbers. I mean, to pluck some numbers out of thin air. The recent television deal for the Premier League in England was £5 billion. So that's no trivial amount of money. And so what we're seeing at the moment is all of these kinds of sums being on hold, and it's not even just the sports organisations. Of course, it's everything to do with it. The broadcasting, the television companies who no longer have this sport to show and have to somehow fill the schedules on the televisions with other things that we might want to watch to attract our attention, to justify all of those subscriptions that we're paying to watch this sport. There's all sorts of uncertainties, and again, the sponsorship. Lots of companies have paid lots of money to have their brand names emblazoned on television sets when matches and games and events are taking place in stadia around the world, and this all isn't happening, so it's all on hold, and it's really unprecedented, unknown. This kind of thing just hasn't happened outside of the world wars, really, and so we really don't know what's going to happen from an economic standpoint, and it really does point to what are governments going to do in this kind of a situation? Because the economics of it, well, the economics of it often doesn't come into it with sport. It's about sport. It's about something we do. It's about who we are, and therefore the government intervention, I think, is going to be particularly important here in terms of supporting the athletes as they move towards 2021 rather than 2020, towards supporting all of the small and even larger sports clubs, sports leagues in their countries and around the world through this prolonged spell where we just can't do any kind of sport.
And James, just to stick with the Premier League that you mentioned there, the English Premier League, they clearly are still hoping that they can finish the league, I think, by the end of June by playing some games behind closed doors. Do you think, clearly there must be financial pressures on the Premier League, do you think it's realistic that the Premier League, English Premier League will get going again?
Well, I guess it has to get going at some point, as you say. What we hope is, of course, that the virus, that the numbers tail off eventually, and the threat of the virus passes, such that we can resume semi-normal life again sometime soon. You can see the argument behind playing behind closed doors to get things done sooner, less of a chance of people being infected by there being thousands of people in an enclosed space. But equally, that's lost revenues potentially. Maybe not for the Premier League, but what the Premier League does in England influences what everybody else does. The EFL, the English Football League, essentially has to follow what the Premier League does. And if the EFL games were behind closed doors, these clubs don't get the same kind of money from television that the Premier League clubs get. And so as a result, that could be very financially difficult for a lot of smaller football clubs around England and indeed in other countries.
Tadgh, there's a psychological aspect to that as well, I guess. How, Premier League players feed off crowds, full stadiums. How are they going to psychologically play a game behind closed doors?
Yeah, it's interesting, and we have experience with this in sport. I think it's more than a decade ago, Serie A, a number of matches were held behind closed doors due to various restrictions. So, look, it turns out that the referee's performance is the one that changes the most, not the players, which is really interesting. But I think fundamentally we should really look at athletes and people involved in sport as people who are resilient. And one piece we shouldn't miss is the fact that the voice of athletes and those involved in managing and supporting performance should be one we listen to. And there's many athletes taking on the role of advocacy in terms of following the national health guidelines in different countries. This is a really important role for athletes to take this advocacy role. So they can be role models just as they can be in many other aspects of life. But in this time, we're having to adapt to new circumstances each week and new restrictions. The voice of athletes is one which will resonate certainly with the young, for sure.
Gail, for you, when you were playing at competition level, how important is it to have an audience there, a crowd there? Could you manage without that?
Well, as a badminton player, I didn't have the luxury of Premier League football match crowds every single time I played badminton. I mean, some places I played, I'd be lucky if there were 10 people watching. But I have had the luxury of playing in places like Malaysia and Indonesia, where there is 20,000 people screaming for you. And believe me, I know it's what I prefer. I prefer the crowds, that's for sure. It gives that atmosphere. And like I said before, it's a way of showing off your skill. I'm a big extrovert, so I love being on that crowd. It felt like my court and, sort of showing off a little bit. This is what I can do. I'm on this court because I'm good at what I do. So it's a real thing about the ego, and the athletes love that. They love performing in front of a crowd. They love performing for their country. They love performing for their club. That's why they do it. It's their heart, their passion. It's part of themselves being part of the sport. So yeah, it's very different when you're sort of trying to, sort of motivate yourself. You want to win this match, and then you go out and then there's no one there. It can be really like, oh yeah, okay, this is a bit like a training session. So it is hard to get yourself motivated for that. But with sports psychologists, with coaches, with managers, and acceptance of the situation. We can't change anything. This is what's happening. I can't suddenly, get a crowd in or, suddenly get loads of cheerleaders going for me. But what I can do is go out there and do my job. And that's what the athletes are. These guys are professionals, whether it's football, rugby league, rugby, cricket, whatever it is, whatever the sport. It's their job. It's their profession. And, if they've got to go out there and do their job, they will do, and they'll find a way.
Of course, it's not only sports people that have their lives upended and placed on hold and restrictions put on movements. Billions of us are facing similar restrictions, but sports people have been going on social media to urge people to follow government orders across the world to stay inside. As an example, take a listen to British two-time world boxing heavyweight champion Tyson Fury.
I hope everybody's keeping well and staying safe and staying indoors and not going out spreading the virus. After listening to what the Prime Minister said, I've took it deadly serious, as should you. Let's fight this virus together as a nation, as a family, as a team, and do the best we can to help others not get the virus and stay indoors. Very, very important. Listen to Boris. Stay indoors. You know, I've had a person bring the gym over to me today. I've got a running machine here, weights, few free weights. I'm going to keep fit and I'm going to post daily videos of myself training and working out to keep you going, to keep me going. Everybody knows without the gym, I'm finished. God bless, stay safe, stay indoors.
Tyson Fury making do like a lot of people. Ty, for athletes stuck at home in often confined spaces, how are they going to manage, especially those that need access even to their coaches? They can't even get to see their coaches.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary circumstance, but we're in a digital age. So we have a capacity to connect with our coaches, to share videos online. Lots of athletes use these platforms all the time anyway to share information with different coaching staff and with their teammates. So it is possible in this current phase. I mean, the way to look at it, many athletes who are looking at a 2021 peak, they can go into what we call transition phase, which is just general fitness, do that for what maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and that might be long enough to see them through, and then resume some form of new normal training. For other athletes, it is incredibly challenging if they're expected to compete within a matter of weeks. I won't guess the timelines, but I'd say athletes are being very inventive. I mean, I've seen, and there's many examples on social media, all sorts of contraptions being developed because not everyone has a treadmill. I've seen a lot of indoor training, and even shared indoor training is a good idea. So athletes could, do their session on the program and then compare afterwards, have a chat with other athletes using a WhatsApp or different social media. I think there is a capacity to have that connectivity, and that connectivity is part of the athlete culture, and that can, keep people together.
Okay, well, I mean, sport eventually we hope will begin again. James, what are you looking forward to? What are you missing most at the moment about sport in the world of sport? What are you looking forward to seeing start up again?
I think just football in the flesh, to be perfectly honest, to be able to go to a game, enjoy the social side of things, chat with your friends and see some fantastic football in front of you for 90 minutes. I really miss it already. It's a real part of our lives here in the UK, and it's just not there at the moment. And I think we really miss all those kinds of little things once they're gone. I'm pretty sure once they return, a lot of us will be going along to them just because we've missed them so much.
And Gail, you're nodding away there. What are you looking forward to seeing again when life returns to normal?
I think this has made a huge impact on the world of sport and the people around. And I mean that in the sense that all the stories we're hearing about athletes not being able to train, or the financial situation of big, small, medium-sized clubs, the lot. I think people now are going to appreciate sport in a whole different light. I think we're going to get more people realising how amazing it is to go out and watch a game. Not just the big clubs, the smaller clubs. And I think that is going to change completely because of what's happened. People are hearing the stories about how it's having a knock-on effect on local businesses, on the community, and all these little things. And I think we're going to have a better sporting culture because of this. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing that. It's going to be a lovely change, but we've got to make sure the world's safe and safe first, that's for sure.
All right, on that hopeful note, I'm afraid we have to end it there, but thanks to all our guests. Thanks to Gail, Emms, Tadgh MacIntyre and James Reade, and thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website aljazeera.com, and for further discussion go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Bernard Smith, and the whole team here in Doha, bye for now.